You may think you're just going through a strange phase, but what you're experiencing is far bigger and far deeper than anything you've gone through before. You're not just changing your habits or adjusting your mindset. You're outgrowing an entire version of yourself that was built for a chapter of life that no longer matches your soul. The things you once allowed now feel heavy. The people you once chased now feel distant, and the emotions that once controlled you no longer hold the same power. This is not random. This is a quantum upgrade taking place inside you, a complete shift in your internal frequency. The old you is dissolving, and a new you, the one aligned with purpose, clarity, intuition, strength, and higher consciousness, is beginning to rise. Today, I will reveal the 7 deep signs that prove your rebirth is already happening, even if you haven't fully recognized it yet. 1. Your brain is rejecting the identity you built for survival. When the old version of you dies, one of the first and most misunderstood signs is that you suddenly feel disconnected from the identity you carried for years. It feels as if your own mind no longer fits you. The thoughts you used to think, the beliefs you used to defend, the personality you used to show the world, all of it begins to feel unnatural, heavy, and out of place. This shift can be confusing because you're not consciously choosing to change. It feels like the change is happening to you from the inside. The truth is, the identity you are losing was never your true self. It was an identity built out of survival, shaped by moments when you felt unsafe, unseen, unheard, or unprotected. Every fear you carried, every insecurity you developed, every pressure you internalized, and every expectation others placed on you created layers around your real self. These layers were only meant to help you survive certain chapters of your life, not define you forever. As you grow and evolve, your brain begins to reject these survival-based layers, the same way a body rejects something that no longer belongs inside it. It starts letting go of the stories you repeated to make sense of your pain. It stops believing the lies you once accepted about who you were allowed to be. It loosens its grip on labels that were placed on you by family, society, or past trauma. You may find that the things you used to defend no longer make sense to you. The persona you performed in front of people feels fake or exhausting. The habits you used to rely on feel pointless. The behaviors you once used to protect yourself now feel limiting or embarrassing. This is not a breakdown, this is a breakthrough. Because your brain is no longer trying to keep you safe using old patterns, it begins clearing out unnecessary emotional weight. It deletes outdated coping mechanisms. It erases identity scripts that kept you small. This can create a confusing experience where you feel lost, blank, or emotionally detached. You might feel like you don't fully recognize yourself anymore, or like parts of your personality have disappeared overnight. But this emptiness is not a sign of something going wrong. It's a sign that your internal system is resetting. You're clearing space for a new identity that is based on growth, not fear, truth, not trauma, authenticity, not survival. You are not losing yourself. You are losing the version of you that life forced you to become. And although this phase feels strange, overwhelming, or unfamiliar, it is one of the clearest signs that a new, stronger, more aligned you is finally rising. 2. Your nervous system stops responding to old triggers. Another powerful sign that the old version of you has died is the quiet transformation inside your nervous system. You begin noticing that situations which once triggered intense emotional reactions no longer have the same effect on you. The comments that once hurt you, the people who once intimidated you, the behaviors that once made you anxious, and the moments that used to make your heart race now feel strangely neutral. It's not that you have become numb or emotionless. It's that your nervous system is no longer operating from fear, insecurity, or past trauma. The old you reacted automatically because your brain had been conditioned to see certain situations as threats based on earlier experiences. But as you evolve, Your system realizes that those threats no longer exist. The emotional alarms inside you stop firing. Your mind becomes calmer, your body stays relaxed, and you no longer feel the urge to defend yourself, overthink situations, impress anyone, or protect yourself from imagined dangers. This shift feels almost unreal because it makes you question why you ever reacted so strongly to certain things in the first place. You may notice that people who used to create chaos in your life suddenly lose their power over you. Their words don't sting the way they used to. Their actions do not dictate your mood. You stop taking things personally. You stop assuming the worst. You stop preparing for disappointment. This is because your nervous system has upgraded from a survival state to a stability state. The old you was constantly scanning for danger, judgment, rejection, and conflict because it learned this pattern as a form of protection. But once the old identity collapses, your energy no longer supports these outdated defense systems. Instead, your internal world becomes quieter, clearer, and more grounded. You notice things without reacting. You feel emotions without being consumed by them. You understand situations without spiraling into fear or confusion. This transformation might confuse you at first because you expect yourself to feel the old pain or panic, but the reaction never comes. You will catch yourself wondering, why am I not upset? Why does this not bother me anymore? Why do I feel so calm? That calmness is proof of evolution. It shows that you are no longer controlled by wounds you didn't create or fears you inherited from your past. You are stepping into a version of yourself that operates from self-respect, emotional intelligence, and inner stability instead of chaos and survival. This is one of the clearest signs that a new you is rising, a version of you that finally understands that peace is your natural state, not a reward you have to earn. 3. Your mind starts deleting energetic attachments. One of the most profound signs that the old you has died is the sudden dissolving of energetic attachments you didn't even realize were controlling your life. These attachments are invisible emotional threads that connect you to people, places, memories, routines, and versions of yourself that you have long outgrown, but still carried inside like ghost energy. The old you stayed tied to these attachments because they once gave you comfort, familiarity, or protection, but as your consciousness rises, your mind begins to recognize that these attachments are draining you rather than supporting you. You start noticing that conversations you used to crave now feel heavy. People you once chased now feel irrelevant. Old friendships, old crushes, old emotional wounds, and old fantasies that once consumed your thoughts suddenly lose their power. It is not that you are becoming cold or heartless. It is that your internal system is reclaiming energy it lost long ago. You can no longer sustain bonds that only fed your loneliness, your fear, or your emotional dependency. During this phase, you may feel confused or even guilty because you cannot explain why certain people or memories no longer affect you the same way. You might wonder why someone you once deeply cared about no longer occupies your mind, or why situations that used to break you now feel distant and meaningless. This is because your mind is pulling your energy back, piece by piece, from every place it was scattered. It is returning your emotional power to you. Your mind is cleaning itself, deleting attachments you outgrew but kept holding on to out of habit, hope, or fear. These threads used to act like portals that drained your mental and emotional strength, keeping you tied to timelines and identities that were never meant to be your final destination. As these attachments dissolve, you begin feeling lighter, not emotionally detached, but spiritually free. You will notice that your memory becomes selective. You stop replaying painful moments. You stop obsessing over what people think of you. You stop monitoring who likes you, who talks about you, and who pays attention to you. The drama that once pulled you in now feels like background noise. The emotional bonds that once felt impossible to break now feel fragile and irrelevant. You may even feel a strange sense of inner silence, as if a part of your mind has stopped talking. That silence is your rebirth. It is the moment you reclaim the emotional energy that was trapped in the old you. This freedom might feel strange because you're stepping out of patterns that shaped your identity for years, but this is how transformation works, not by forcing change, but by releasing everything that no longer belongs to the person you are becoming. This is not you losing your heart. This is your heart learning to stop bleeding for the wrong things. This is not you becoming distant. This is you becoming aligned. Your energy is returning home, and the emotional bonds that once controlled your thoughts are fading away because they were never meant to follow you into your next chapter. This process is one of the clearest signs that your old self has died and that a new, stronger, more self-connected you is finally rising. 4. You begin receiving future signals instead of memories. One of the most powerful and mysterious signs that the old you has died is when your mind stops operating from the past and begins receiving impulses from the future. Most people live their entire lives through memory. They make decisions based on what they've already experienced, what hurt them before, what disappointed them before, and what failed before. But when you step into a higher version of yourself, your consciousness no longer pulls information from the old timeline you've already outgrown. Instead, it begins to connect with who you are becoming. This is why you suddenly feel strange urges to change your life, even when nothing dramatic has happened externally. You may feel drawn to new places, new people, new habits, or completely new directions that your past self would have found irrational, scary, or impossible. These impulses are not random thoughts. They are signals from your future self, the version of you who already exists on a higher frequency and is trying to pull you forward. During this transition, you may notice moments where your intuition feels louder than your logic. You might wake up with a clear desire to move on from something you once clung to, or you may feel a quiet pull towards something you never imagined wanting. You may feel the urge to end a relationship, quit a job, shift your lifestyle, create something new, or break a cycle that has repeated for years. This is not restlessness, this is alignment. Your future is calling you, and your mind is beginning to tune into the path that leads you there. You're no longer guided by your wounds, you're guided by your potential. And because this shift is so sudden and unfamiliar, it often feels confusing or even frightening. You may even question yourself, wondering, why do I want this now? Why doesn't my old life feel like home anymore? Why do I feel like something bigger is coming? These questions appear because your inner world is expanding faster than your outer world can keep up. This phase can make you feel like you're in two timelines at once. One part of you still living your current life, while another part already senses your next chapter. You might feel disconnected from your old desires because your identity is no longer aligned with them. You may feel a strange excitement mixed with fear because your soul knows you are stepping into a larger version of yourself. Your thoughts begin shifting from, what if it goes wrong, to, what if this is meant for me? You begin imagining yourself in new possibilities, not because you're dreaming blindly, but because your consciousness has already stepped into that reality. The old you lived through memory. The new you lives through vision. When your brain begins receiving future signals, it means your frequency has shifted from survival to creation. It means your identity is aligning with your higher path. And it means that life, the universe, and your own soul are pushing you forward into the person you were always meant to become. This is one of the most profound signs that the old you is gone and the new you is rising. Because you are no longer being pulled backward by your past, you are being pulled forward by your destiny. 5. You develop emotional gravity that people can feel before you speak. Another profound sign that the old you has died and a new you is rising is the shift in how people react to your presence, even when you haven't said a single word. This change is not physical, it is energetic. When your inner world elevates, the vibration you give off becomes stronger, clearer, and more focused. People can sense it, even if they don't consciously understand it. The old you carried emotional noise, insecurity, self-doubt, fear of judgment, the need for approval, and the pressure to perform a certain personality. These things made your energy shaky and inconsistent because you were constantly adjusting yourself to be liked, accepted, or understood. But once the old you dies, that noise disappears. You no longer carry the heaviness of trying to prove anything to anyone. You stop shrinking yourself to make others comfortable. You stop forcing conversations, forcing connections, or forcing explanations. Your energy becomes stable, grounded, and unmistakably confident, not because you're trying to be confident, but because you no longer carry the internal chaos that once weakened your presence. This energetic shift creates a kind of emotional gravity around you. Some people will feel drawn to you without knowing why. They may find themselves wanting to be near you, seeking your guidance, or respecting you in ways they never did before. They sense that you have changed, that you are more self-aware, more composed, and more aligned with your true self. At the same time, others may react very differently. People who were used to your old patterns, your softness, your people-pleasing, your emotional availability, your fear of confrontation may suddenly feel uncomfortable around you. They might become distant, jealous, irritated, or even threatened by your new energy. Not because you did something wrong, but because your growth exposes their stagnation. When your frequency rises, it naturally disrupts anyone who benefits from your old self. The people who needed you insecure will not know how to handle your confidence. The people who relied on your silence will be confused by your clarity. The people who fed on your emotional weakness will panic when that weakness disappears. You may notice that you no longer attract the same types of people. Low-energy personalities lose interest because they cannot pull anything from you anymore. Emotional manipulators fail because your mind is no longer reactive. People who once dismissed you suddenly take you seriously. People who used to dominate conversations now quiet down around you. People who once ignored you now pay attention. None of this happens because you changed your words or behavior. It happens because your energy no longer matches your old identity. Where you once tried to be liked, you now embody self-respect. Where you once needed validation, you now carry certainty. Where you once feared losing people, you now trust that whoever leaves was never meant for your next chapter. This shift is subtle but incredibly powerful. It shows that your transformation is real, not imagined. You don't have to announce anything, defend anything, or explain your evolution. Your presence speaks for you. Your silence speaks for you. Your boundaries speak for you. Your lack of reaction speaks for you. Emotional gravity is the natural result of inner alignment. When you stop living as the version of yourself built from fear and start embodying the version built from truth, people feel that power before you even open your mouth. And this is one of the clearest signs that the old you is gone, because the new you no longer asks for space. The new you becomes the space. 6. You enter the void phase, the space between two identities. One of the clearest and most transformative signs that the old you has died is when you enter what many people call the void. This is not a physical place, but an inner state, where everything you used to rely on, your thoughts, your habits, your emotions, your desires, your beliefs, even your sense of direction suddenly feels unclear, foreign, or disconnected. It is the uncomfortable space between who you used to be and who you are becoming. Most people misunderstand this phase and think something is wrong with them because it feels like nothing makes sense anymore. You may wake up feeling empty, unmotivated, or unsure of what you want from life. You may feel like your old goals no longer excite you, your old routines no longer comfort you, and your old personality no longer fits. You might even feel like you are drifting through your days without a clear purpose. This unsettling experience is not a failure. It is the death of your old identity, making space for something new. The void feels strange because your brain is letting go of patterns that once defined your sense of self. When those patterns disappear, your mind creates a temporary silence, almost like a blank canvas. There is nothing familiar to hold on to, but nothing new has fully formed yet. This creates a feeling of floating, not moving backward, but not yet moving forward either. It feels like you're in a hallway with two doors, one behind you that has already closed, and one in front of you that hasn't opened yet. You try to push yourself into old behaviors, but they feel lifeless. You try to force excitement for things you once loved, but your heart doesn't respond. You may feel disconnected from people you used to be close to because your energy no longer matches theirs. You may feel distant from your own emotions because your soul is rebooting itself. This phase can create fear because the mind hates uncertainty, and the void is pure uncertainty. Your old identity tries to pull you back by making you doubt your decisions, question your progress, and fear that you are losing yourself. But what you are losing is not your true self. You are losing the outdated identity that was built from pain, fear, and survival. The void is the transition point between a life you have outgrown and a life you haven't stepped into yet. It feels lonely, but that loneliness is your inner world separating from everything that is not aligned with where you're heading. It feels slow, but that slowness is your nervous system resetting itself. It feels empty, but that emptiness is fertile soil for the next version of you. The void is not punishment, it is preparation. Every major transformation in life passes through this phase because your mind needs time to shed old beliefs, your emotions need time to detach from past wounds, and your soul needs time to reorganize your energy for the next chapter. If you try to rush through it, you will repeat your old patterns. If you surrender to it, you will rise into a version of yourself that feels more authentic, powerful, and grounded than anything you have ever experienced. The void teaches you to trust the process, even when you cannot see the outcome. It teaches you to rely on inner guidance rather than external validation. Most importantly, it teaches you that transformation is not always loud and dramatic. Sometimes it is silent, still, and deeply internal. This phase is uncomfortable because your identity is being rewritten. But once you understand that the void is a natural part of your rebirth, you stop fearing it. You realize that the feeling of not knowing who you are is actually the first step toward discovering who you are meant to be. And when the new door finally opens, everything that felt confusing will make sense. You will look back and understand that the void was not the end, it was the beginning. 7. Your perception of time shifts as your frequency changes. One of the rarest and most powerful signs that the old you has died and the new you is rising is the moment you start noticing that your experience of time no longer feels the same. This shift is subtle at first, but once it begins, it becomes impossible to ignore. Days may feel faster or slower without any logical reason. Moments that should feel ordinary suddenly feel significant. You may experience déjà vu more often, as if you have somehow lived certain moments before. You might notice patterns repeating in strange ways, numbers appearing in synchronistic sequences, or events lining up in perfect timing. These experiences can feel surreal, but they are not random. They happen because your internal frequency has shifted, and time responds to frequency. When your identity changes, the way you process reality changes with it. The old you experienced time through memory. Everything was measured by the past, by what happened to you, what hurt you, what shaped you, and what you expected based on old patterns. You were constantly comparing your present with your history, predicting your future based on experiences that were no longer relevant to your growth. But when the old identity dies, your mind stops referencing the past as its main source of information. It starts referencing possibility. It starts referencing potential. It starts referencing the direction your soul is pointing you toward, and because of that, time begins to feel like it is expanding, bending, or collapsing in ways the old you cannot understand. There will be moments where you feel as if everything is happening all at once. Your thoughts, your emotions, your insights, your realizations, your intuitive nudges, all rushing forward like waves. This is because your mind is downloading new perspectives faster than before. You may also feel moments where time slows down, where you sense that the moment you are living in is important, even if you don't know why. You might feel a sudden quietness inside you during an ordinary event, as if the universe is pausing everything around you so that you can receive something, a message, a realization, a shift in awareness. This stillness is not accidental. It is the result of your consciousness syncing with a new timeline. As your perception of time shifts, you will also notice that your relationship with the future becomes different. Instead of worrying about what will happen, you start feeling a strange sense of trust. You feel as if something is guiding you, even if you cannot explain it. You begin making decisions based on intuition rather than fear. You stop feeling rushed, pressured, or trapped by deadlines and expectations. Instead, you feel like life is moving with you rather than against you. The future no longer feels like a threat. It feels like a path unveiling itself step by step. You begin understanding that time is not a straight line forcing you forward. It is a field of possibilities responding to your level of awareness. This shift can be confusing because the old you lived inside a rigid mental structure built by survival. That version of yourself believed time was limited, that opportunities were scarce, that mistakes were permanent, and that life was something happening to you. But the new you begins to see time as something flexible, abundant, alive, and deeply connected to your inner state. You realize that when your energy is low, time feels heavy. When your energy is rising, time feels expansive. When you resist change, time drags. When you embrace your evolution, time accelerates. You begin to see that time does not control you. You influence it through your consciousness. And then comes the most important part. The more your awareness expands, the more you understand that the version of you in the future is not separate from you. It is not waiting for you. It is guiding you. All the synchronicities, all the intuitive impulses, all the moments that feel like signs or messages, they are the result of your future self, calling you forward, adjusting your path, pulling you into alignment with who you are becoming. This is why, when your old self dies, your perception of time shifts so dramatically. You are no longer living in the timeline of fear. You are living in the timeline of purpose. This experience is not imagination. It is the universe organizing itself around your transformation. Time bends for those who are becoming someone new. Time expands for those who are breaking out of old identities. Time speeds up for those stepping into alignment. Time slows down for those who are meant to notice something deeper. When your perception of time changes, it is the universe's way of showing you that you are no longer the person you used to be. You are entering a new timeline with a new identity, new awareness, and a new frequency. Your rebirth is not coming, it has already begun. Number 8, your old emotional programming begins to collapse, and you start feeling emotions you never allowed yourself to feel before. One of the most powerful signs that the old you has died is when your emotional programming, the automatic reactions, coping strategies, and emotional defenses that shaped your entire personality begins to break apart. This collapse doesn't happen suddenly. It happens slowly, quietly, almost invisibly, until one day you realize you are no longer responding to life the way you used to. The emotions you once ran from, suppressed, or numbed out of fear or habit begin rising to the surface, not to overwhelm you, but to free you. The old you never allowed these emotions to fully exist because they felt dangerous, heavy, or unacceptable. You may have been taught to hide sadness, swallow anger, silence discomfort, pretend to be strong, or act unbothered, even when your heart felt like it was breaking. But as the old identity dissolves, the emotional armor that once protected you becomes unnecessary. Your nervous system no longer reacts from survival, so your emotional body begins releasing everything you've been holding inside for years. At first, this can feel confusing because the emotions that arise may seem random, unprovoked, or disconnected from your current life. You may suddenly feel waves of sadness without knowing why, flashes of anger that don't match the situation, or moments of vulnerability that you've never allowed yourself to experience. This is not regression, it is release. Your emotions are finally being processed in the way they were meant to be processed, not buried under the weight of expectations or the pressure to appear okay. You might cry unexpectedly, not because something is wrong, but because you are finally safe enough to let your heart breathe. You might feel anger surface, not because you're becoming bitter, but because your soul is rejecting the boundaries you allowed to be crossed. You might feel grief arise, not because you're losing something, but because you are acknowledging the pain you never allowed yourself to acknowledge before. As this emotional programming collapses, you begin to understand that most of the emotional reactions you lived with did not belong to your true self. They belong to the version of you built from trauma, fear, insecurity, and people-pleasing. The old you learned to stay quiet when you should have spoken, to stay small when you should have expanded, to stay calm when you should have defended yourself, to stay tolerant when you should have walked away. When these emotional patterns collapse, the delayed truth of your life begins to reveal itself. You realize which people hurt you more than you admitted. You realize which situations drained you more than you allowed yourself to feel. You realize how many times you betrayed your own needs just to keep peace or avoid conflict. This awareness is painful, but it is also liberating, because it shows you exactly where the old identity was limiting your growth. As your emotional body recalibrates, you begin to feel emotions with clarity instead of confusion. Instead of drowning in sadness, you acknowledge it and let it pass. Instead of suppressing anger, you understand the boundary it's telling you to set. Instead of numbing loneliness, you use it to reconnect with your inner self. You become emotionally mature in ways you never imagined possible because you're no longer reacting from childhood wounds or past fears. You are responding from awareness, strength, and self-respect. This shift changes everything: your relationships, your decisions, your communication, your boundaries, your energy, and your view of yourself. You begin loving yourself in ways the old you never had the courage to. You begin protecting your peace in ways the old you never thought you deserved. You begin expressing yourself in ways the old you would have considered too risky, too honest, or too vulnerable. The collapse of your old emotional programming is not chaos. It is clarity. It is the dismantling of the emotional cage you lived in for years. It is the moment you stop fighting your feelings and finally allow them to guide you instead of control you. This shift is one of the most powerful signs that the old version of you is not only gone, it has been replaced by a stronger, wiser, emotionally grounded version who understands that healing does not come from avoiding emotions, but from facing them, feeling them, and freeing them. Your emotions are not breaking you, they are rebuilding you. The old you survived by suppressing, the new you rises by releasing. 9. Your inner voice becomes louder, clearer, and impossible to ignore, even when it tells you things you don't want to hear. A profound sign that the old you has truly died is when your inner voice, the quiet intelligence that has always been within you, becomes louder and clearer than ever before. This inner voice is not the voice of fear, overthinking, or insecurity. Those belong to the old identity. The voice you start hearing now is the voice of your highest self, the version of you that has always known what you truly want, what you truly deserve, and what your soul has been trying to guide you toward for years. When the old identity collapses, the mental noise that used to drown out this voice fades away, and suddenly you begin hearing truth with a clarity that can be both comforting and confronting at the same time. This inner voice speaks differently from your thoughts. It does not rush, panic, or pressure you. It does not insult you or scare you. It does not confuse you or overwhelm you. It simply tells the truth quietly, consistently, and fearlessly. You may begin feeling strong intuitive nudges that guide you towards certain people, paths, or decisions. You may feel a sudden knowing that you need to leave something behind, even if it once felt important. You may sense that a situation is no longer aligned, even if it looks fine on the surface. You may feel pulled toward a new direction without understanding why. This voice becomes so clear that ignoring it feels painful, not physically, but emotionally and spiritually, as if betraying yourself. The old you dismissed this voice because the old you was trained to survive, not to listen. Your past taught you to silence your intuition so you could fit into environments that were too small for you. You learned to override your instincts to avoid conflict, to please people, to stay comfortable, or to maintain relationships that were draining or imbalanced. But now, with the old identity gone, the excuses that once justified ignoring your truth no longer work. Your inner voice begins to confront you with honesty that cannot be softened. It tells you when someone does not respect you, even if you used to pretend everything was fine. It tells you when your life needs change, even if you tried to convince yourself you were comfortable. It tells you when you have stayed somewhere too long, tolerated too much, or sacrificed too deeply. It warns you when a pattern is repeating. It shows you when a boundary is needed. It reminds you of who you truly are, beneath all the versions you performed to survive. At first, this clarity can feel overwhelming because it forces you to face things you avoided for years. You may feel sudden waves of truth crashing through you, realizations about your relationships, your habits, your environment, your dreams, your purpose. Some truths will hurt, not because they are cruel, but because they reveal how long you have ignored your own needs. But the more you listen, the more you feel aligned with yourself. You begin trusting your instincts over other people's opinions. You begin making choices that honor your growth instead of your fear. You begin moving with a sense of certainty that replaces the confusion you carried for years. This shift changes your entire life, because once you hear your inner voice clearly, you cannot go back to pretending you are blind. You cannot unlearn what you now know. You cannot return to a lower level of awareness. You cannot silence a truth that is speaking louder than your fear. Your inner voice becomes a compass, guiding you through uncertainty, through decisions, through endings, through beginnings. It brings you into your authentic path, not the path life forced you to follow, but the path your soul has been waiting for you to see. This transformation is not about becoming someone new. It is about returning to the version of yourself that existed before life taught you to doubt your own wisdom. When your inner voice becomes impossible to ignore, it is proof that the old you, the one who lived from fear, approval-seeking, and emotional survival, is truly gone. The new you rises with clarity, intuition, and inner truth, leading the way. 10. You begin rebuilding yourself from zero, not out of desperation, but out of alignment. One of the deepest signs that the old you has died is when you begin rebuilding your life from a place of truth rather than fear. And this rebuilding doesn't look dramatic from the outside. It happens quietly, internally, almost invisibly. Before this shift, every decision you made was shaped by who you used to be. The fears you carried, the wounds you protected, the validation you needed, the roles you played, the expectations you tried to satisfy, and the emotional patterns you inherited without questioning them. But when the old identity collapses, you no longer feel compelled to build your life on these shaky foundations. Instead, you feel an inner urge to start again, not because your life is falling apart, but because your soul is rising into a version that requires stronger, cleaner, truer foundations than the ones you once lived with. This rebuilding phase can feel strange because it starts with questions you never had the courage or clarity to ask before. You begin asking yourself what you truly want, not what others expect from you. You begin questioning the goals you once chased, realizing that many of them were built from insecurity, pressure, or comparison rather than genuine purpose. You start noticing the difference between the life you had and the life you desire. You become aware of what drains your energy and what nourishes it. You begin caring about your peace more than your image, your truth more than your reputation, your alignment more than approval, and your future more than your past. This shift is powerful because it forces you to rebuild your inner world with intention instead of survival instincts. During this transformation, you may feel an urge to simplify your life, to clean your space, change your routine, distance yourself from certain people, or let go of commitments that no longer resonate. You may start setting boundaries that you once avoided. You may feel drawn to habits you previously didn't have the discipline for, not because you suddenly became someone new, but because the new identity rising within you no longer tolerates self-neglect. You begin choosing what feels right instead of what feels familiar. You begin living with awareness instead of autopilot. You begin building a life that reflects who you are now, not who you used to be. This rebuilding process is not loud or dramatic. It is slow, steady, and deeply personal. You begin replacing old beliefs with new ones that support your growth. You begin healing wounds you used to ignore because you finally understand that healing is not optional, it is essential. You begin developing new emotional habits that help you stay grounded, present, and connected to your higher self. You begin building a mindset that supports your future instead of repeating your past. Each small decision you make becomes part of the new foundation you're constructing, and even though it may feel gradual, it transforms you in ways that become undeniable over time. As you rebuild yourself, you may notice that your priorities shift dramatically. You no longer chase attention because you value peace more. You no longer stay where you are tolerated because you understand your worth. You no longer sacrifice your identity to make others comfortable because you finally respect your own voice. You no longer carry guilt for choosing yourself because you know self-betrayal is the most destructive form of abandonment. You no longer cling to relationships, habits, or environments that keep you small because the new you refuses to shrink to fit into old spaces. This rebuilding phase teaches you that growth is not something that happens to you, it is something you consciously choose every day. Eventually, you realize that you are no longer rebuilding from emptiness, but from alignment. You are not trying to escape your old life. You are creating a new one that matches your new frequency. You are not fixing the old you. You are becoming someone you never had the space or courage to be. The rebuilding becomes a declaration that you have stepped into a new timeline. And when you look back months or years later, you will see that this quiet reconstruction was the moment your transformation became permanent, the moment the old you died, not with chaos, but with clarity, and the new you rose not with fear, but with purpose. This is the final confirmation that your rebirth is real. You are no longer living a life that happened to you. You are building a life you consciously choose. You are rebuilding yourself in a way the old you never could and never would. When you look at all these signs together, you begin to understand something profound. The death of your old self is not a moment of destruction, it is a moment of awakening. It is the quiet collapse of every identity you built out of fear, pain, rejection, pressure, and survival. It is the gentle dismantling of every version of you that carried burdens you were never meant to carry, performed roles you were never meant to play, and tolerated pain you were never meant to accept. This transformation does not happen loudly. It does not announce itself. It does not wait for the perfect moment. It unfolds slowly, quietly, and deeply inside you, until one day you realize that you are no longer the same person you once were, and you can never go back to the version of yourself who lived their life through trauma, limitation, and emotional exhaustion. The death of your old identity may feel uncomfortable because it removes everything you once used to define yourself. Your patterns, your reactions, your attachments, your relationships, your beliefs, your familiar emotions, your coping mechanisms. But what feels like loss is actually liberation. What feels like confusion is actually clarity emerging. What feels like emptiness is actually space being created for a higher, stronger, more authentic version of you to rise. This rise is not dramatic or sudden. It is steady, intentional, and irreversible. It happens every time you choose peace over chaos, truth over illusion, alignment over approval, and self-respect over self-betrayal. As the new you emerges, you begin to see your life through a completely different lens. You realize that not every ending is a tragedy. Some endings are a blessing that your soul orchestrated long before your mind understood. You realize that losing old attachments is not abandonment, it is protection. You realize that outgrowing people is not pride, it is evolution. You realize that setting boundaries is not selfishness, it is self-preservation. You realize that walking away is not weakness, it is wisdom. You realize that the path you were afraid to take was the path you were always destined to walk. And most importantly, you realize that the version of yourself rising now is the one you were meant to become, all along the version beneath the wounds, beneath the programming, beneath the expectations, beneath the fear. This new you does not react from pain, it responds from awareness. It does not seek validation, it honors its own truth. It does not cling to the familiar, it reaches toward the future. It does not collapse under pressure, it stands with grounded strength. It does not chase love, it becomes love for itself. It does not fear endings, it trusts beginnings. This is your rebirth, not as a different person, but as your real self, the self that was buried under years of survival and finally has enough space to breathe. So if you feel the confusion, the emptiness, the detachment, the emotional shifts, the intuitive impulses, the collapsing of old patterns, understand that you are not breaking down. You are breaking through. You are not losing yourself. You are finding the self you lost while trying to survive. This is your transition into a higher timeline, a higher identity, a higher awareness. The old you has served its purpose. It protected you when you were fragile, guided you when you were lost, and carried you through chapters you didn't know how to navigate. But now you have outgrown that version, and your soul is asking you to rise. A new you is not coming. A new you is already here, and the moment you accept this truth is the moment everything in your life begins to change, not by force, but by alignment, not by fear, but by intention, not by holding on, but by letting go. This is your rebirth. This is your awakening. This is your rise.